Shalom, shalom, shalom. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero. As we continue chapter 6 of the dietary laws, a diet for the soul, you are what you eat. We're looking at koshering meat. We're going to take a look at a couple of ways of koshering meat, and this is essential as part of the dietary laws. Prohibition of blood. Torah forbids us from eating blood, even when it comes from kosher animals and birds. It doesn't apply to fish, because fish has a form of blood that's not from an animal necessarily, and can be consumed. But blood from fowl or other animals, as it says in Leviticus chapter 7, verse 26 through 27, that anyone who eats the blood shall be cut off from his people. It's also mentioned in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 10 through 14. And that expression, cut off from his people, it is karet. Now, some people means that they no longer have a connection with the people of Israel. Others say that the person basically prematurely dies and leaves this world. There are different interpretations to karet. I won't get into that right now, but just to let you know, the person will be cut off from their people. Now, to avoid the violating prohibition against eating blood, it must be removed from the meat by one of two methods. Number one, by the method of soaking and salting, commonly called koshering or koshering. The second method is by broiling the meat under a flame in an electric oven or broiler. In this process, the flame or electric heat purges the blood so that it drips out. Obviously, everything that it touches becomes not kosher. Either process of broiling or that of soaking and salting is required for meat and fowl and constitutes another step in rendering the kosher animal or fowl that has been properly slaughtered fit for kosher to be eaten. Where meat or fowl, even from kosher creatures that have been kosher slaughtered, it is cooked and otherwise prepared without the necessary prerequisites regarding the removal of blood in the required manner, it becomes treifa or not kosher. During the cooking, the blood of the meat seeps out and the meat stews in its own forbidden blood, making treifa and prohibiting the entire content of the pot and pan wherein it drips. Now, obviously, the meat itself is dripping, and therefore we need to wash it down, normally with cool water, to make sure it does not hold on to any part of the meat tissues. Koshering by broiling. Broiling must not be done in a pan, but on a grill that allows for the blood to drain off. The grill is on or spit, which is unkoshered meat is broiled, should not be used for broiling the meat which had already been koshered. The raw meat must first be thoroughly washed while on the fire, and it should be lightly salted. Another thing that we see is that the meat, after it's done, must be washed off in cold water to remove the blood clinging to it and satisfies the koshering requirement. It may then be reheated or broiling continued to suit the taste on another grill, not the same that was used to kosher, or spit and reserved in a broiling of kosher meat. Now, liver, there's no way of koshering liver except by this method of broiling, and it contains so much blood it only can be prepared by this method. The method of soaking and salting does not work on liver and may not be used on it. Koshering by soaking and salting. The meat must first be thoroughly washed down under running cold water and then placed in a pail of cool water and allowed to be soaked for a half hour. Afterwards, the meat must be entirely immersed in water, and this serves to soften the meat. The meat which became frosted during refrigeration should not be salted until it's been allowed to thaw to room temperature. After a half an hour period of soaking, the meat should be thoroughly covered on all of its sides, inside and out, in the case of a fowl, with a layer of medium coarse salt. Usually kosher salt is used for this. Salt of proper coarseness for the purpose is marketed in the U.S. as kosher salt. Ordinary table salt is too thin and tends to melt away or even become absorbed into the meat instead of using it to extract the blood from the meat. The salted meat or fowl is then placed on a flat surface, which is kept inclined at an angle to allow the blood to drain off, and it is perforated drain board with an opening like a grid to allow for draining is used and is not needed to be inclined. The meat or fowl is kept in its salt for a period of 1 hour. Under extreme emergencies or conditions, it could be reduced to about 18 minutes. After the hour, the salt should be thoroughly rinsed off under the running water. The meat or fowl is now ready to be boiled or fried or baked. Broiling is done on a kosher grill or spit. The vessel or pail used for soaking the meat or the fowl should not be used for any other purpose. Soaking and salting must take place as soon as possible after the meat is purchased. In any case, it should not be delayed. The last time it's washed down, there should be, from the last time it's washed down, 72-hour period. Beyond that, it needs to also go before the 72 hours to be washed again. The information may be obtained from the butcher. If it's delayed, it's unavoidable, and the meat should be washed down thoroughly with cold water before the 72 hours elapse. This is to prevent the blood in the meat from drying up and congealing, which can make subsequent salting and soaking ineffective. Should the meat be unavoidably kept beyond 72 hours without being washed down and without being koshered, it may no longer be soaked and salted. The blood can only be removed through broiling at this point. An egg yolk found inside of a chicken must be soaked and salted. It should, however, lie in the salt apart from the fowl or at the upper end of the perforated board. Furthermore, such as egg yolk is not considered totally parve. Eggs are usually considered neither meat nor milk, while it is considered the yolk. Once there's blood in the yolk, it may not be eaten together with dairy. And obviously, we take the yolk of the egg and we remove the blood spot, if it's possible, or discard the whole entire egg. In recent years, most kosher butchers in the U.S. have been provided the additional consumer service upon the request of consumer that they will kosher the meat, soak and salt the meat for the customer, and recently introduced this to eliminate much of the bother, therefore, the housewife in preparation of kosher meat. While in some places a small charge is charged for this process, but one must keep in mind that the butcher does not kosher the meat unless he is requested to do so. It is the duty of the housewife to do it if the butcher is not. Kosher packaged fresh frozen meat are always soaked and salted at the processing plant, and it will be indicated on the package. It's advisable that all meat intended for the freezer to be koshered by soaking and salting before it's frozen and stored away. I like to wash down the meat because when you get it even koshered already, there's a whole bunch of issues with the meat. It's good to wash it down to take away the bad smell. Sometimes it's used in the koshering plant that they put into the package to preserve the meat, even though they kosher it and salt it. So it's a good practice to always wash down kosher meat. Takes away the salt content. Ground meat must be koshered before being ground up. Most of the ground beef that you see as kosher has been already salted and may not be eaten and longer treated as kosher. If cooked in the pot or broiled in the pan, it renders the utensil or vessels as treifa, not kosher. The use of an egg with a blood spot is forbidden. Eggs used for cooking or baking therefore be carefully checked for blood spots. Now, the role of a shochet and a kosher butcher. Although we do not include them in this series, the kosher consumer should be aware that there are many complex laws regarding conditions which makes treifa a kosher animal and that was properly slaughtered. The shochet and the rabbis who supervise him must have a thorough understanding of these laws. The shochet is required to carefully examine the lungs and other internal organs in the animal after it's slaughtered, especially if there's reasons to suspect that not meet all of the many complex criteria for sound health as set forth by the Jewish code of law. Sometimes there may be cancer within the lungs or other types of adhesions or discoloration, internal injuries, or even limb fractures, which renders the entire slaughter as treifa, as not kosher to the point of view of Jewish law, and then is sold to the non-kosher consumer. because obviously we Jews we won't eat that. It's considered not kosher. Although the United States government has its own sets of standards and criteria on passing fitness of meat, kosher slaughter must be met also to pass inspection, government inspection, USDA. It is quite possible that the meat which meets the USDA government standards could be ruled treifa and unfit according to Jewish law, non-kosher. The kosher butcher must also possess a special skill and take special precaution that if the kashrut meat is delivered to him, is to be preserved. Fresh meat, for example, that has not been soaked and salted cannot be kept after slaughter for more or longer than 72 hours without being washed down. And if it's kept for longer periods, washing down must be repeated every 72 hours. This is to prevent the blood from drying up and congealing, and therefore rendering the useless and subsequent soaking and salting. Useless, or unless a butcher has sold his meat within a specified period of time, he must be conscientious that after washing, he must also process the butchering skill to purge or excise certain blood vessels and fat and sinews which may not be eaten. This must be done before the meat is kosher. The butcher must be relied upon to perform special responsibilities, and not only skillful but honestly. Consumer must therefore be assured that the kosher butcher, for whom the buyers are unable to be reliable or under reliable rabbinical supervision, under guaranteed by a certificate of endorsement that ought to be prominently displayed. This becomes very important. Frozen kosher meat or other processed meat products may be brought in the general supervised food market only if they are completely wrapped in package and the package bears a legible endorsement of kashrut of the product by a reliable rabbinic authority of the kashrut board. Now, on meat and milk mixtures, we're going to take a look at the meat and milk issues in our next video. And we'll take a look at that in our following video on meat and milk mixtures, the issues that relates to the mixing of the meat with the milk. Cheeseburger, can you have one? We'll take a look at that in our next video.